Hello, ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, and welcome to a new episode of Author Talks, where I, Thomas Wrightson, talk about things and whatsits that I find interesting, and give you readings either from my own work, or bits of short fiction that I liked. So first for today, it's a short story reading, one I posted on my website a long time ago, and decided to re-present in audio form. It was a story I brainstormed with my late father, and wrote down well before the Panini came along in 2019 to 2020 and made its context much more relevant than it should have been. I present to you The Cleaner. This account is for the benefit of those who may read it after my upcoming and state-sanctioned death. I think they'll find it maybe not amusing, shocking perhaps? Come on. I let myself be led from the van without protest. I was in my scrubs and mask, and when the cleaning gear was forced into my newly liberated hands, I looked for all the world like a 0-hour cleaner. The guard, gruff as always, shoved me through the door of the evacuated hotel. "It's on the roof, deal with it." Not quite monosyllabic, but certainly curt. It was a long trek up the stairway, up to the roof where my task was waiting for me. The building had been evacuated about an hour before, shortly after a patrol drone had spotted the thing on the roof. After that, the drone had remained while people were rushed out and given preventative treatment. Assessments were made about how long the thing had been there. Then I was called for, or rather, I was picked out from a large selection of society's unwanted. Better than the needle, I suppose? It took 10 minutes to reach the roof, up the main stairway, then via a service entrance. It wasn't hard to find my assigned cleanup. There it was, sitting in a slightly curled up position just hidden by the concrete balustrade. It had been human, and was still to a degree, but the string-like fungus had completely covered their form, and from the pores round the joints came the first edges of immature fruiting bodies bearing the germs of a billion spores. I waited a minute, and the drone appeared overhead with the cleaning equipment clutched in its pincers. It dropped it gently beside me. I looked through the glass eye holes of my mask. A body bag, a bucket, and the most powerful fungicide yet developed. At this stage in its development, there was every chance to package up the body before anything else happened. Then it could be sent either for complete disposal or for further study at a research lab. I set to work, doing all that I had to do. It was difficult peeling the person off the concrete, as the fungus's threads had already knitted themselves into the stone. Uncurling them was also a gruesome task, and it was more as pieces than as a whole that I deposited the late person in the bag and sealed it. Then I cleaned the outside as was standard protocol, before setting to work with the cleaner on the area where the poor bugger had settled down. It's a strange compulsion when you see it in humans, but people expect it in insects taken by this thing's distant cousin. They go to high places, driven by the threads in their disturbed nervous systems, and from there spread their spores over a vast area. Of course, some fictional worlds have been created with fungi like this, but they usually melded with reanimated corpses and turned them into easily defeated monsters. Idiots, and that's before they put in abusive father-daughter relationships to spice up the drama. Here, there was no obvious monstrous state, just a silent retreat to some high place, what appeared to be passing into sleep. Then the fungus used the body as nourishment to feed its reproduction. "Nice sight," I said to myself as I scrubbed the corners with the stinking fluid. "All I have here is the fresh air, the open views, and the all-encompassing stink of fungicide that'd take my fingers off if not for these gloves." I'd finished cleaning the surface, and the drone was back at my signal, scanning the area. It scanned everything, then flashed green and returned to its handlers below. I was now to wait until the proper team came up. And there, I remembered the sentence, given by that dried-up old hen of a judge. "You are hereby found guilty of wilful murder by the use of fungus cordyceps homomalum. For this, you are sentenced to death, with the method used allowing the responsible authorities to use you for cleanup in the event of infection." A nice sentence. I hadn't liked the bastard, so giving him a physical demonstration of what I thought he was seemed most suitable. I'd been able to get the stuff quite easily through my contacts with the research groups. I'd given it him in his usual lunchtime water. He never saw it coming. and as I stood there, I considered what I'd done as I cleaned up the remains. I gently folded back one bit of my gloves, where the fungus rested against the skin. It wasn't painful, but I knew a trace was there and would vanish before they got the suit off. As I write this, I'm on death row. My execution's coming up tomorrow. I've been in contact with lots of people since then. Cleaning staff, the officers, other prisoners. No names, of course, and who knows who some of them will have touched. You see, something most people don't know about this fungus that I do is that it can be spread through the transference of traces from skin to skin. All I need to do is rub on the right surface with that patch of infected skin. It'll be ages before I feel the compulsion. Perhaps I'm feeling it now. I certainly want to go somewhere high. Oh well, my execution's coming up very soon. Last meal all done. And I just need to finish this up. And as I'm writing this, I think I can safely say I'll die with a smile on my face. After all, it'll be their fault that I'm not around to tell them who I infected. I close now. Yours most sincerely. I hope you enjoyed that unsettling little vignette. Now for some updates. Firstly, while I had intended this year to be a quiet one, it hasn't turned out as such. From the 4th to 5th of October, I shall be attending 2 events at Rainbow Space Magic, an online convention focusing on LGBTQIA+ speculative fiction. I'll be doing a reading on Saturday, and on Sunday I'll be part of a panel titled Writing About the Past. In the current environment, it will be good to attend and, get a feel of how things are going, and also it's a way of standing up against the everything. Next, I'm also going to be busy with production stuff as my audio play, The Angry House, moves forward into the further stages of production. No further updates, but I'll link an episode in the description relating to it as part of the Write On podcast, which is associated with the sponsor of the competition that I submitted it to and the organisation that I had the awards at. Finally on the agenda, after spooky readings and stuff like updates, is music. Specifically music I enjoy. Call this the recommendation section if you like. Also, fair warning, I shall be using samples, but due to potential copyright stuff they may be low volume, so just trust me that you are hearing bits and pieces from them. Forgive me if this just turns out to be a recommendation/reminiscence list. When I say music, I don't just mean music generic. I specifically mean video game music. Even though I've been playing video games on and off since my mid-teens, I hadn't gotten into the music part for a long time. I knew there were pieces of music I really enjoyed, but I didn't use them for work. I also wasn't into online music, since at the time it wasn't nearly as readily available as it is now. I used other bits and pieces of music that we had in our CD collection, like classical or jazz, or worked in silence. But then I discovered video game music through some initial scores that just hit me and helped me work once I had them as standalone releases, primarily on CD. Believe it or not, this point in the original script was where I was just going to go through a random assortment of titles and list names on names on names, but instead I'll highlight some of the soundtracks that genuinely spoke to me and have helped me work on various projects, starting with, in no particular order, first is Tomb Raider Legend, one of my favourite games, at least through rose-tinted glasses. I'm hoping if a remaster appears that it'll hold up, and its soundtrack by Troels Folmann is amazing. A combination of ambient, tribal, orchestral and electronic that was unlike anything I'd heard before. I had zero nostalgia for the series score, and for me personally, nothing has ever topped the Lao trilogy as a whole in terms of music. Legend remains my overall favourite, musically, and the perfect thing to vibe to when creating something adventurous and mystical. I created a whole adventure series in part to the backdrop of this soundtrack. The second, and one that I know I want to write some stuff to and have written some stuff to before, is the soundtrack for Ubisoft's Beyond Good and Evil, composed by Christophe Heral. I'm not entirely sure how to classify this soundtrack except perhaps as avant-garde. It combines ethnic, hip-hop, orchestral and techno elements with other things into something that I've never heard anywhere else. I know that's similar to what I said about Legend, but it's a different kind of never heard it before. There are some bits I just skip over a lot of the time, such as combat, but the environmental themes for the planet and different dungeons are so evocative and powerful that it just speaks to my writer's brain. Next, and the one that I say for dark techno writing or something similarly sci-fi alongside ambient sounds I found in earlier days, are the scores for Deus Ex Human Revolution and its sequel, Mankind Divided. Primarily composed by Michael McCann, this score is very future, very cyberpunk, very techno-electronic, with some choral bits mixed in for flavour. I like it so much that I went to the effort of getting both on CD back in the day. It's not exactly a happy score, which suits the series' tone, but it has less of a fixed identity than some other scores I remember from that time. It also makes great ambient sound videos for me to check out and write to, so that's a plus. Next are two composers whose work just resonate with me equally, Masashi Hamauzu and Hitoshi Sakimoto, both alumni of Square, now Square Enix, and both people who lent a new and to me more appealing sound than the previous lead series composer Nobuo Uematsu or its current big name, Masayoshi Soken. I first encountered Hamauzu's work through Final Fantasy XIII and its sequels, and I can honestly say his work is my favourite across all of Final Fantasy. My favourite score overall of his is for Legend of Legacy, where he really flexes his love of combining piano, violin and electronic elements into something both calming and energising. Admittedly, this style isn't for everyone. I've met plenty of people who just can't get along with his style, and I accept that. I just think his work is perfect for long days of writing in worlds that are separated from the everyday. This isn't like Uematsu, where intrusive modern themes or established styles will break in and shatter my illusions of the world. Looking at you, Final Fantasy IX. Hamauzu's work just fits my vibes, and I always look forward to original compositions by him. Hitoshi Sakimoto, and by extension the team he gathered at his independent music studio Bass Escape, may not have as many bangers in my books as Hamauzu, but he has done some incredible work that I will always gravitate towards when I want a certain sound. His Final Fantasy scores, specifically Tactics, Tactics A2 and 12, are stunning in their own right. His two crowning achievements for me are Vagrant Story and Archaic Sealed Heat. Vagrant Story has a soundtrack that is both unique and soothing with an experimental spin, while Archaic Sealed Heat is perfect for vibing in fantasy realms. And out of the work from Bass Escape that may or may not involve him, its output for Vanillaware covers most of the work that I listen to most constantly: Dragon's Crown, Muramasa, Grim Grimoire, Grand Kingdom, and especially the sci-fi infused 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. Next, and finally in terms of specifics, are two titles composed by the same person, Ryota Kozuka. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the scores of many a Megami Tensei title, from Meguro's work on mainline Persona to more obscure library titles like Trauma Center, from Atlus that is. But Kozuka's work on Shin Megami Tensei 4 and 5 surprised me because it grew on me and I really liked it, despite being in a genre that I typically don't like. I've never enjoyed metal or punk in its pure form, but the Atlus team just seemed to manage it somehow. These are worlds filled with grim yet occasionally comedic content, philosophical themes, and frequently an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic vibe. Just the thing if you're wanting to create something that isn't bare McCready-style monotonous droning from one note to the next. This is music with style and pizzazz, and it's still written for a decaying city or half-ruined desert wasteland where gods and angels duel for supremacy. It's just it won't bore you out of your skull in the process. There are others I might mention in detail, but I don't think I will. There's Kumi Tanioka with her heavenly scores for Crystal Chronicles and Code Age Commanders, Yoko Shimomura with Parasite Eve, the Gust team for multiple Atelier titles, Yasunori Mitsuda with the somber yet epic compositions of Xenogears and Chrono Cross, Swedish composer Solar Fields who did incredible work on the two Mirror's Edge titles. You may think I've been fairly selective with these scores, focusing more on the East than the West. And that's because the real awakening to video game music's potential to inspire didn't come until I had heard offerings from Japan. Don't get me wrong, Western music is good when it's not falling into the trap of being a homogenized orchestral milieu, but it often has so much identity or direct association with a title that I can't use it for work. Japanese music likely also has that association for people brought up in that country and culture, but for me there's generally enough of a separation that it's more down to personal taste than anything else, or whether their musical style fits with the setting I'm writing in, or the task I'm doing. I know I could go on for days citing specific titles or composers whose work just clicked with me and helped me work or something. Okami, Journey, Bloodseed, Tales of the Gendia, Valkyria Chronicles, Panzer Dragoon Saga, Fire Emblem Awakening, Zelda Skyward Sword, Saga Scarlet Grace, Trials of Mana, Barnacle, Legend of Mana, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. But this script would just turn into a complete mess of a list and I'd have to speed it up even more than I had to do just then. I also want to specify that while this phenomenon is a common factor with me, it's not a rule with exceptions, those words being in quotes. There are times when a soundtrack that isn't video game based has helped me work. Jerry Goldsmith's original unbutchered Alien score was a massive help writing parts of Lost Station Courtesy, for example. Links to that book in the description, shameless plug. And there are also times when any kind of music is distracting and I still have to work in silence. There are also some soundtracks that I love, but that also have so strong an identity or association that I can't really use them for anything. The biggest example off the top of my head is Drakengard and Nier. One an often cacophonous experimental piece, the other melancholic and iconic. Both favourites, but both inextricably linked with the creations of Yoko Taro. And I guess all this leads to the main question that comes up in my mind when thinking about this. Why video game music specifically? Why does that help me focus? Why not film scores, the old standbys of classical, song albums from different artists? You know, the, quotes, traditional audio helpers for creatives. I think my answer comes in two parts, generational and personal. My generational bias is that I was born in 1994, the year the PlayStation released. I've been brought up through the digital age and seen YouTube, social media and streaming platforms all come into prominence for better or worse. I've lived to see physical media types rise, fall, and rise again. It means that in terms of pop culture, I was brought up in the era of the easily accessed fan upload, so soundtracks were available to me when they were region exclusive or limited runs. Bear in mind, it's only in the last half decade or so that most of the soundtracks I've mentioned became available through official streaming channels, and there are still gaps. The second is personal. When I listen to most film scores, when they have a standalone identity, I see the scenes associated with them in my head vividly. It's a scripted sequence, something I've watched. When it's a video game, its interactive element creates a subtle disconnect. There are pieces with strong associations to particular sequences, like Blinded by Light, I Was Born for This, Icarus, Kaze no Ne, Brat Overflow, but there are others, or even whole swathes of a soundtrack, which just work to put my head in a certain mood space and help with creating my worlds, be they sci-fi, fantasy or adventure. When I imagine worlds of my own, I usually have some kind of visual and soundtrack to accompany it. For instance, my upcoming cluster cycle novel, The Murderer's Lament, was focused on a lot of deductive and smooth tunes, drawing from things like the Trauma Center series and Zero Escape alongside sci-fi ambience. Starborn Vendetta and Lost Station Courtesy before it also had different flavours of music backing them up, somber mood pieces for the one and elements of sci-fi horror for the other. My still unpublished Helena Adventure series was firmly grounded in the music of Tomb Raider pre-2013 reboot, and my fantasy offerings have much to thank Hamauzu, Sakimoto and Mitsuda for. My influences and inspirations in terms of story tend to lean quite Japanese, or at least the same area where Japanese creators also got their inspirations. So it makes sense that Japanese game scores help my writing more than Western ones. And as music streaming broadens out and albums continue to be released, or fans do the good work preserving albums that would otherwise vanish into obscurity, we continue to find new ways to help create these worlds, or fulfill any other kind of work we might want to do. Thank you for listening if you've reached this far. I hope you enjoyed the short story, I hope you appreciated my updates, and if you decided to stick around for the music, that you maybe found a few composers you'd like to try out for yourself. As ever, if you'd like to support me, links to my books are in the description. The next title, The Murderer's Lament, is going into the line edit stage. I also have the audio play being set up, and I'll be delighted to give more information about that as we progress. Also, do check out Rainbow Space Magic, as many panels as you're interested in, not just the ones I'm part of, because every little bit helps. As ever, if you like my content, please share, subscribe, like depending on platform, and until next time, see ya!